Episode 2. Better Lucky Than Dead. Part 1. Looking out over the cityscape, the mayor of Paul Vale waited for news about the church convoy. Mayor Rob Stein was a portly, aging man, but his tired brown eyes showed his wisdom and experience. As he waited, he inspected the gates of his proud city. Soon one of his young messengers approached.
The convoy we are waiting for appeared in a small village just outside the forest. That was 2 days ago.
Standing miserably at attention, the young messenger handed over a sealed document.
We have seen an influx in refugees of late, sir.
The older man's wrinkled face smoothed in the evening's starlight. Brick and wood cottages formed a circle around the town center, where bustling businesses played host to travelers and opportunists. Lively music played as outsiders and townsfolk alike flocked to the restaurants laughing, and the sounds of conversation carried through the cold, damp night. The streets, masterfully crafted with marble and gravel, gave off a reflective shine as the moonlight and fire lamps illuminated them. Eloquence and refinement were the first things people remarked on when visiting Paul Vale. Prosperous towns, once abundant, were a rare sight in the world now. The church had a vested interest in all cities surviving and growing without influence or interference. With the human population growing again, trades and skills were becoming more valuable in dealing with rising governments of far-off lands, as much as with local provisional magistrates who ruled and squabbled over the West's mineral-rich lands. Civitas Levi, the holy city in the common tongue, was the only surviving megacity in the western lands. With a population in the millions representing a range of nationalities, it encompassed everything that remained of an ancient religious capital. Its clean marble buildings had stood for centuries. Once a barely surviving relic, it was now thriving and had regained its dominance. As the political powers of the world focused on rebuilding politics and friendships, the largest of 3 major Western human cities held a delicate balance of power, and the cardinals had begun arguing, then fighting, over who would instruct the young, newly crowned pope. Battles for influence and greed turned the inner chambers and halls of the great cathedrals bloody as assassins moved through the darkness. Cardinals began sending expeditions and convoys all over the continent for their personal benefit, to locate other thriving cities, towns, even caravans. Anything that might be leveraged into political capital. The mayor feasted his eyes on the wealth of his town as the people below drank and celebrated another good harvest. They had just finalized new trade deals, and the year's hard work was already being transformed into textiles, new crops, and refined ores, all packaged and shipped to the eastern markets.
Men.
The 3 youths surrounding him carried short blades, rifles, and torches. They all shivered in the cold rain.
Yes, sir.
Come get me as soon as the church representatives arrive.
Mayor Rob Stein patted each boy on the shoulder in turn, his wet hands sliding off their coats, and turning the dust and dirt into streaks of mud. After they left, the town's leader headed over to the carnivorous boar. The aroma of freshly seasoned meat pies and roasted root vegetables drifted out of the pub, drawing customers in. "The mayor is here!" a patron announced loudly. Cheers erupted, sending food and drink flying off the tables, smashing on the floor. Exhausted, he took a seat and asked for the special, braised duck and gooseberry pie. The mayor's tired legs gave out as he used his arms to take a seat. The cracked oak chair groaned under his weight as he pulled it close to one of the newly crafted tables, a sound the cheers did little to hide. As he waited, a heaviness came over him, sinking into his gut, and a cold sweat broke from his brow.
Why do I have such bitterness in my mouth?
A crack of thunder set the windows rattling, and raindrops tapped against the glass. Heavy pellets of rain exploded on the sandy roads, quickly saturating them and forming wide, muddy potholes. Within minutes, the path to Paul Vale was a swamp, and the traveling band of clergymen were forced to stop. Trees swayed violently, and leaves danced down through the air. The wind picked up, sending the leaves swirling calamitously toward them. A whiff of iron grew in the air, and nervousness overtook the priests as every animal cried out at once, and the rumble of thunder played an orchestrated symphony with them. Ahead through the woods, a pathway was just visible. Moving into the trees, a grandly armored paladin raised his hammer and charged it, making it lucent. Light ruptured out and radiated in every direction, mirroring off the paladin's armor. Holding the hammer aloft, he waved his companions to follow as he drove himself forward. Thick branches cracked each time the commander raised his hand high, and he balled it into a fist. The party emerged from the dark woods and halted again. Across from the fields from them, the gate to Paul Vale stood anchored shut. The convoy of Templars were accompanied by a small chaperone of priests and a bishop. The bishop carried 2 large books. In his pack was an old, embroidered Bible for prayers. In his hands was a used War College textbook on the history of the Templar Order. Paying little attention to his surroundings, he held the book as he read.
The Templars were established 500 years ago, during the fallout of the nuclear winter and the emergence of the wasteland, by the Council of 12, those deemed the most influential cardinals in the war-torn megacity. The Order's charter was foremost to protect priests and priestesses from harm while serving as explorers and caravan guards for those traveling in the corrupted lands. They have since expanded into the military arm of the Church. Templars led by the Grand Inquisitor and Grand Priest have protected the Holy City and its interests during the burning of the Old World and the current Reformation. The surviving governing bodies used science to alter the DNA of embryos, giving Templars resistance to radiation and the power to wield it as a weapon. Regis Cromround, chronicler to the Pope.
As the church envoy arrived at the gate, they noticed a young guardsman overlooking the bulwark.
Stop!
A warning shot followed the shouted command, penetrating the ground before the group. The explosion of gunpowder was audible throughout the town. Dropping his food to his plate, the mayor pushed his seat back and jumped up to rush toward the gate. The few remaining militiamen joined him in investigating the situation. Heavy-footed traffic kicked up the marble gravel as the group hurried to the barrier.
What's happening?
The mayor asked. He had stopped, bent over, grasping for air. Breadcrumbs and the aroma of gooseberries vented from his mouth. A young man pointed down to the visitors, who stood warily with their hands up. One of the priests stepped forward. His golden hair stood out almost as radiantly as his dark blue eyes.
We were ordered here to assist with incoming trouble.
Mayor Robstein looked down from the barricade.
And you are?
The priest looked up, taking in the body language of the pudgy man who asked the question.
I am Father Alfric. We represent Cardinal Audrey, the Premier of these lands.
The mayor studied the group as he considered Alfric's words.
How do I know you're not ruffians trying to take advantage of us?
Trust!
Alfric said as he pushed himself forward.
Mayor, what should we do?
The nervous young guard turned to the portly man for direction.
Let them in. Put them up in the crumbling church for now, and have our soldiers stand guard over them until I can verify what they say.
The gates opened shyly, allowing the travelers to enter the city.
Follow us, please.
The militiamen waved the group onward, leading them to a boarded-up building with church propaganda plastered on the oak doors. One of them ripped a few sheets off to reach the doorknob, and the drenched article was taken by the wind and pushed into Alfric's coat. Grabbing the page, he scanned it.
Side effects of the alterations led to massive men and women with bolstered bone density and resilient muscle fibers. Enhanced with nanites, humans gained the ability to use their natural electrical energy fields and the radiation in the air. These natural forces could be used to create miracles, also known as magic. Magic in the New World became an unlimited resource, as long as casters avoided overheating their bodies. The natural energies did cause a buildup of heat in the tiny machines, which would stop functioning as conduits and regulators of life if the paladin's internal temperature grew too high. The Order was created and governed by religious science and technology, but the Templars also trained in armed and unarmed combat. The power of magic is still not fully understood. Chants and mantras are used by those gifted enough to manipulation and cast with the primal energies. The beloved nickname, Soldiers of the Light, was given to them by the scattered survivors of the wastelands. The Order gained notoriety for slaughtering rogues and monsters as they cleared old towns, and those who witnessed the Templars fighting off mutated wild animals and the Dark Ones began to rely on their might and generosity. Their dedication to their faith and their absolute trust in the Church leads Templars to follow orders fanatically. In the Lost World, these men would have been considered radicals or zealots. Now they are the protectors, guardians, and heroes of the people. Regis Cromround.
Crumpling the page into a ball and tossing it aside, Alfric followed his group into the cold but dry building.
Wait here until we say otherwise.
Not wanting to cause an unnecessary fight, the priests and paladins found places to sit and rest their travel-worn feet. The moon shifted gradually, leaving the old church in complete darkness, and Alfric started to doze. He opened his eyes as his rest was disturbed by arguments. The church doors were kicked open, and a parade of villagers entered the rundown building. Forcing the militiamen out of the way, townsfolk bombarded the clergymen with kindness and small comforts. The locals heard about the priests and Templars being allowed into the city and had brought them food, towels, and blankets. The commanding Templar leveraged himself upright on his huge hammer. His fitted armor let out visible steam at the joints, giving him an aura of warmth and power. Reaching up, he opened his helmet's faceplate, showing tired eyes with crow's feet in the corners. Sharing a deep smile, the man accepted the towels and food.
Gregory, distribute the towels to the priests.
Pulling himself up slowly, Vera's lieutenant worked his way over and collected the towels.
Templars, you may remove your faceplates and helmets.
The order was met with an exuberant,
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question, sir?
Vera glanced down at a tiny woman. Allowing gravity to take its course, he dropped to a knee.
What is it?
Don't you need to dry off as well? I can go get more towels.
Vera softly laid a hand on the woman's head, and warmth spread through her body.
My man and I will be fine. Our temperatures rise when we focus our energies. That creates the steam you see seeping from our armor. Our priestly friends over there will appreciate the towels a lot more.
Vera raised himself back up. Taking a stance, he glanced over the crowd, nodded, and began helping to distribute the food. Sitting up, Alfric accepted a towel from Gregory.
Are you okay, Sia?
The young knight began inspecting the priest. Alfric's eyes showed a deep sadness.
I am fine, Lieutenant. Just nightmares and bad memories.
Gregory nodded empathetically.
Dry off, Sia, and have some food. We are making a fire to warm the place up a bit.
Alfric unbuttoned his cassock and laid it across an empty bench. Then taking the towel, he started patting himself down, taking away some of the dampness. His eyes gravitated back to the volume with its missing pages. Hoping to clear his mind, he sat down, opened the book again, and plunged back into his reading. Standing more than 6'6" on average, Templars were chosen young and then modified for war as they were indoctrinated into the church. Each soldier equipped himself in skin-tight wild-boar leather and fitted plate armor, with a full-faced helmet, a thorn crown protecting his head. This design increased mobility while providing maximal protection. The armor represented their faith and bore a symbol of their savior spread across the chest. After that, the armor was custom decorated for the Templars' rank and achievements. Each warrior of light fought with swords and a dagger, as well as their distinctive mechanical hammers and firearms. The giant hammers were conduits for focusing their energies. The nanomachines inside their bodies allowed the Templars to draw in and store external radiation and expel it with force, and as they absorbed radiation, they stored the excess in their hammers. When they unleashed the charged-up power, they could perform offensive and defensive miracles. The symbiotic relationship between man and machine also allowed for amplification of the electromagnetic energy of the body, creating barriers of impenetrable light. As knowledge of science and technology had grown scarce, this machinery gave the Templars a godlike stature in the people's minds. Alfric raised his eyes and closed the book. The rain had stopped, and the windows now showed a clear night. He reached for his jacket, but, still waterlogged and heavy, it slipped through his hands to the floor. He picked up the jacket and squeezed a small waterfall out of the cassock onto the dirty wood. Scanning the room, he found his fellow priests huddled around the bishop to his left. Meanwhile, the Templars were carrying the drums to the church's center. Vera's voice rang out.
Clear the benches. Use any dry wood to build a fire.
Alfric glanced back at the priests. He could easily read the body language of the bishop. Why did they send a bishop who hadn't spent any time in a conflict zone? Hoping to head off trouble before it started, Alfric grabbed some food and distributed it to the other clergy. Once they were caught up in feeding themselves, he made his way over to the Templars.
Knight Commander.
What is it, Alfric?
Alfric jerked his head toward the bishop.
He's losing his nerve. You're going to have to set him straight.
Vera let out a tired groan.
Always something, Alfric. Things were a lot easier when we were recruits.
No. You're just feeling the stress of being the commanding officer.
Vera cracked a smile.
I guess you're right.
He walked over to the bishop, and his voice erupted through the church as he berated the high-ranking clergyman.
Get yourself together. You're a church official. If this little journey was enough to break you, what's going to happen when things get serious?
Alfric turned away from the scene and walked out of the church. 2 Templars grabbed their food and followed him. As he stepped past the militia guards, he was ambushed by a swarm of children.
Mister, tell us some stories.
Yeah, mister. Tell us stories.
Alfric smiled and gathering the children into a circle around him. As the Templars stood guard, he spun out his stories of giants, monsters, and dragons. Other children flocked to the priest as their young minds fell under the spell of his words. After a time, Mayor Robstein waddled up to the old church.
The entire convoy from the church is no more than 15.
The captain of the militia briefed him.
10 Templars deployed to protect 5 priests.
They are not enough to secure our city.
Still, out of breath, the mayor tried to hide his fear, but his eyes betrayed his feelings.
Father Alfric.
Robstein turned toward the tall, slender priest.
They are coming.
He huffed.
I just received this missive from one of the village scouts. Those filthy monsters are coming. I don't know why they are this far south already, but we can't protect the city. Most of our militia is protecting a caravan to the east.
The mayor handed the missive over to the priest, before he rubbed his hands dry against his pant legs and coughed, trying to clear a dryness in his throat.
Not like they would make a difference in this situation.
Don't panic, Lord Mayor. Church intelligence knew that Paul Vale was in danger. Cardinal Audrey overheard conversations in the lower sanctum of the Holy City's cathedral. We're here for that reason.
But there are so few of you. Only 10 Templars? The rest of you are just priests.
Have faith, Lord Mayor. We only need to buy enough time to get the villagers out of harm's way.
Alfric focused his gaze on the overwhelmed man. Nervousness had made the mayor's wrinkled skin slick with sweat.
I need you to issue evacuation orders to your citizens. Then you can leave the rest to us.
What are you going to do?
Alfric smiled.
I am going to have a chat with the knight captain.
He walked inside through the moldy doors inlaid with silver and gold. The lobby gave off the shivering judicial scent of a courtroom. Dirty but exemplary tapestries hung from the rafters, and the shadows gave them a lifelike look, watching and judging.
The battle for separation was a nasty affair,
Alfric said, filling a bowl, inferring that trouble was on the horizon.
But I fear internal politics will always win out over what's right.
The commander reached across the tempered flame, keeping the room warm, and touched Alfric's shoulder.
I was there. Many of our brothers remember what you did too. You saved lives, and you ended a war we should never have been fighting. What you did was necessary, even if it meant killing the last Knight Commander and Pope. It must weigh heavily, and it is commendable how you can live with your decision.
Maybe.
Alfric sighed. His long blonde hair still stuck to his face. The damp black coat he wore tightened around his body as if searching for warmth.
I made several decisions that set me on this path. Killing my mentors was just one of them. I feel a deep emptiness due to the seal placed upon me.
Alfric handed the missive over to Veru. The younger knights, still stuffing food into their mouths, slowed or paused as they gawked at the 2 veterans, faces full of almond porridge, stale bread in hands. Others, sitting to eat, found themselves listening in on the conversation between the 2 men. Finally, Vera stood.
Enough with the scuttlebutt. Get yourselves in gear. We have incoming.
The Templars drank down the last of their porridge and picked up their gear as they headed for the doors.